In the past few years, we've seen Microsoft really upping their command line game. First with PowerShell, a powerful console language that challenges traditional command line shells like Bash and Z shell. And then with the Windows subsystem for Linux, letting you run Linux command line apps and shells in Windows. Now, to go along with PowerShell and WSL and the good old command prompt, Microsoft is also offering Windows Terminal, a modern terminal application that lets you use all three and much more in the same app. Today, I show you how to install it, highlight its main features, and even make it pretty. Windows Terminal is a container for command line applications. It's not a shell in itself, it's just the terminal program. It supports multiple profiles. You could, for example, have PowerShell, Z shell, Azure Cloud Shell, and command prompt all in the same session, in the same window. So each of these can live in a tab in the same terminal window, centralizing all your command line needs. Whilst there are other applications which already do this, Microsoft is billing Windows Terminal as a first-party modern replacement. For example, Windows Terminal fully supports Unicode and UTF-8, which of course includes emojis. It also supports GPU-accelerated text rendering, background images, and customizable actions. The Windows Terminal is entirely open source, which follows a trend Microsoft is taking, at least with developer tools such as the Package Manager. It's nice to see this happening, and certainly not something I would have predicted not too long ago. So let's install the Windows Terminal, take a look around, and see what we can do with it. Okay, so the first step in using Windows Terminal is to get it installed. Now, chances are, if you have an updated version of Windows 11, you already have it. You can just go to the search bar here, and you can see that I have Windows Terminal here. However, if you don't have it installed, and possibly even if you do, you may want to take a look at the Microsoft Store, either to install it or, more importantly, to upgrade it, since there is quite a large difference between Microsoft Terminal 1 series and the Microsoft Terminal 2 series. The 2 series has a graphical settings panel, whilst with Windows Terminal version 1 series you need to configure it using a JSON file. So just search for Windows Terminal in the store. You can see I have it here. Obviously in my case it says open. In your case you'll be able to say install or update. And if you like to live on the edge, there is also the preview version of Windows Terminal that includes some new features. But again, I mean, it's up to you. I'm going to be using the stable version for this video. Okay, so now that we have the terminal installed, I'll go ahead and launch it. Windows Terminal. And straight away we see this note here: Windows Terminal can be set as the default terminal application in your settings, which, if you're still using the command prompt, is a no-brainer. Yes, you want to do that. So I'll click Open Settings, and I'm going to change the default terminal application here to Windows Terminal. And it also lets you choose your default profile. Now you'll notice here that besides Windows PowerShell, this is what comes pre-installed with Windows, I also just have PowerShell. So this is Windows PowerShell version 5 point something. This is PowerShell, the cross-platform PowerShell version 7 point something. So I'm going to set that as my default profile as well, and click Save. Okay, so that's a good thing to do to make sure that you're using all of this stuff. Okay, so going back to Windows Terminal, you will see that we have a tabbed interface here, and that it has opened the PowerShell profile. Now, if I click this plus button here, a new tab will open, and by default, all new tabs open with your default profile, which in my case is PowerShell 7. However, there will be other profiles installed. If you click this arrow here, you can see other profiles. Now, interestingly, I've configured pretty much none of these. Okay, so the Windows PowerShell is pre-installed, command prompt is obviously pre-installed, the Azure Cloud Shell profile is either automatically pre-installed or is pre-installed when you install the Azure command line utilities. This is PowerShell 7, which I downloaded myself and includes a profile for the Windows Terminal. And then, so notice I have git bash here. Recently I installed Git on this machine, and during the setup process it actually asked me whether I wanted to add a Windows terminal profile, which I did, and you can see it right here. So the idea here is that the Windows terminal should automatically detect any profiles you need and add them here. Interestingly, this also includes WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux, if you have that enabled. Unfortunately, I can't enable it here since this is a virtual machine and I can't run it with nested virtualization. But if, for example, you have Ubuntu installed, you'll find it here as well. Now, if I click on this icon here and I go to Settings, this is the settings screen. This is new to the version 2 series of the Windows terminal. Okay, so these are the startup settings that we saw earlier with the number of columns and rows we want, as well as the options to set it as the default. We have interaction, like automatically copying stuff when you selected, the text format for copying, tab switcher style, etc., etc. And here we have the appearance. And you can see that right now I set it to follow the Windows theme, and you can decide whether tabs are shown, where they are, and so on. Here we have color schemes. As you can see right now I have Campbell, but I can do something like solarized dark, for example, which will change the color scheme of not just the text in the terminal, but the terminal itself. I'm actually going to keep this on Campbell, since I actually quite like the default. And you can actually add a new color scheme yourself and customize the colors, and then you'll be able to select it from here. From rendering, we can choose some rendering options. By default, Windows Terminal does use hardware accelerated rendering. And this is the super important page where we can configure our actions. So, being a terminal application, most of the things you can do in Windows Terminal can be done via the keyboard. So, for example, Control-Shift-T, which is that, opens a new tab, as you can see, and you have many default shortcuts here, including 3 for paste, and you can edit any of these shortcuts you want. And down here, actually up here, you can actually click Add New, and then you can choose what you would like to do. For example, summon Quake window, and I'm going to give it a shortcut of Control and tilde, and we'll click Save. Okay, and as you can see, when I now press Control tilde, I get a terminal that drops down from the top part of the screen. I can even resize it. And clicking it and pressing it again removes it. So it's called Quake window for all you young people out there, because this is how you would get to a terminal in games like Quake, Doom, and so on. You'd press a shortcut and the command prompt would pop up. I think it's pretty cool to be able to do this regardless of where you are. Now down here, you can see that there are the profiles. If I go to defaults here, I can set the starting directory, the default appearance, which again ties into the theme, and from advanced here I can add some other text, anti-aliasing settings, history, and so on. But then you have a section for each profile that is configured. So for example, you'll notice here I'm using PowerShell. Okay, and so if I go to the PowerShell profile, I can have specific settings for this profile, such as its name, what to run, the starting directory, icon, the appearance, which includes the text, the font size, cursor, and so on, and even a background image. We'll see a little bit of that later, and some more advanced settings again related to history and anti-aliasing. So you can truly customize your environment depending on which profile you are working with. Now, in previous versions of Windows Terminal, you had to customize all of these settings using a JSON file. This is no longer, strictly speaking, required. However, you still have access to the JSON file. So if I click Open JSON file here, it will open in your default editor, which in my case is VS Code. You have all of these settings here. And the nice thing is that this JSON file, as you can see up here, has a schema. And so, for example, if I wanted to go down here to my profile section, okay, you can see that there are my profiles here. Now, if I wanted to set a background image, for example, I can simply go here and then start typing background image, and as you can see, the list of properties I can use comes up. So it's a JSON file with a schema, meaning it's relatively easy to edit it should you need. In my case, however, I'm not going to save any changes here. Now, profiles are a pretty big deal here. So what I want to do here is create a profile for working on a development environment. Okay, so what I'm going to do is click Add New Profile, and rather than starting from scratch, I'm going to base it on the PowerShell profile I have here. So I'll just click Duplicate, and then I can set the stuff. So I'm going to call this, for example, Dev, and I'm going to change the default startup directory to my Documents folder, and in here, for example, I'll create a folder Code, and I'll choose that guy. I'll leave the icon as is, tab title, dev environment, ideally spelled properly. Now from appearance here, now what I want to do is set a background color. However, you will notice that there doesn't seem to be the option to set the background color here. So this is one of those options where we still need to go into the JSON file to set it. For now, I'll just make sure that everything else is okay, the cursor, text formatting, acrylic, etc., etc. And now I go to advanced, and yeah, that's pretty much okay. So I'm going to click save. So this profile is now created, as you can see here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click open JSON file and find the profile that I've just created, which, as you can see, is this one here. You will notice here I have the starting directory. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another property here, background and as you can see, it suggests that I provide a color. So I'm going to set that to some sort of green. And now you can, of course, use the color picker if you want to. But in my case, I'm actually going to type a color myself, which is, let's see, 13A, 10E, which is that kind of green background color there. Okay, so I'm now just going to save this file. Okay, and now if I go back to the Windows terminal and go to my dev profile, in appearance you'll see that I get that background color there. And if I open a new dev tab, you will see I get that green background color. Now, of course, in this case, you may want to change the text colors a bit so they're more visible, but you kind of get the idea. Now, to make it more obvious that I'm in the dev environment, I'm actually going to add an image here as well. So I'm going to go back to the profile, and from background image, I'll click browse, and I have this dev icon here, which I'm going to use. And as you can see, we can choose the stretch mode. I'll say none, and I'll align it to the bottom right. So these options appear once you've selected an image, and I'll click save. And so now when I open a new dev shell, you will notice that I get that icon there, kind of showing me that I am in the dev profile. Now, of course, if I have a dev environment, I probably want to have a prod one as well. So again, I'm going to click add new profile, duplicate the dev, and this one I'm going to call it prod. And I'm going to call the title prod environment. And now I'm going to go to appearance, and I'm going to change the background image to this caution icon to remind me that I am in prod. And I'm also going to save. Now I do, however, want to change the background color. So I'm going to go here to my settings.json file again, find the prod environment, which is this one here, and now I'll just click here and choose a reddish background color. Maybe something like that sounds fine. I'll save the file, close, and now as you can see I have a red background and the GIF admittedly an ugly GIF, but you can find a better one right here. And so now if I open a new production environment, you can see I have that image and the red background to remind me, yo, you are in the production mode. Now, of course, you could have many similar tabs open. So maybe I can open a prod environment, I can open from here another prod environment, and then a dev environment, okay? So I have many. And it might be hard to remember what's what. And so that's where a tab color comes in handy. So I can right-click on the prod environment tab, click color, and assign this a color. So maybe I'll make this bluish color, and I'll make this pinkish color, why not? Okay, so as you can see then, when switching between tabs, I can remember kind of what color means what depending on what it happens to me. Now, what might be useful is opening dev and prod simultaneously, for example, and we can do that by splitting panes in the terminal. So I'm actually gonna right-click. You can see I'm on the dev environment now, okay? So I'm gonna go here, and I'm going to go to prod. Now you can see in the tooltip it says alt click to split the current window, shift click to open a new one. So I will alt click, and you will notice that now I have a split window where I have dev on the left and prod on the right. And this can be really, really useful for anyone who's used the terminal. You can appreciate that this is a really, really handy feature. Other terminal programs allow you to do this, of course, but it's nice to have it in the Windows terminal as well. We can, of course, shift click. So again, I can open Git Bash, for example, by shift clicking. And as you can see, Git Bash then opens in a separate window. And I can split panes however I want. So again, I'll go to Git Bash here and I'll click Alt click, and you can see now that I have actually 3 different profiles loaded in the same tab, and I can work efficiently like this. Now what I'd like to do is make my terminal pretty. You remember I have a video on customizing your Bash and even macOS shells, so can we do the same for the Windows terminal? And the answer is yes. So the first thing we're going to do is open a browser and install a nerd font. So a nerd font contains extra symbols that will be required when you are displaying extra stuff in your terminal prompt. I'm going to go to downloads here, and there's a bunch of different fonts that you can download that support these symbols. Now, the default font that Microsoft uses, I'll just show it to you here in one of the profiles, is Cascadia, and it's actually a really nice font. Now, on Nerd Fonts, there's this font called Cascadia, but spelled differently, which is basically the same as Microsoft's font, but with the added symbol. So this is the font I am going to use, but of course any of these many other fonts will work just fine. I'm just going to go download this one. So that's downloaded, and I'm going to extract those fonts, and then right-click and show more options, install for all users. Okay, so the fonts have now been installed. So now having done that, I'm going to go to my defaults profiles, and I'm going to change the font face. Now, of course, I do need to restart Windows Terminal for it to pick up this new font. So that's what I'm going to do here. And again, I'm going to go to Settings, Defaults, Appearance, and I'm going to change the font face to Cascadia Nerd Font. Okay, and I'll click Save. Okay, as you can see, it looks exactly the same. It's based on the same Cascadia font, but it has those extra symbols. Okay, so next we'll need to install a module called Oh My Posh. Okay, in a previous video I used Oh My Z Shell to customize Z Shell. Oh My Posh is the same, but for PowerShell. We can do this from PowerShell itself by typing install module Oh My Posh scope current user. Okay, so that's the command you will need. Okay, and I'm gonna say A for yes to all. This installs from the PowerShell gallery. Okay, that's done. And one thing we'll need is to make sure the module is up to date. This isn't strictly speaking required since we've just done it. But for some reason on the Microsoft documentation it says to do this, so who am I to contradict them? Okay, so that's done. Now we just need to tell PowerShell to load this module on startup, and we need to set a theme. Now speaking of the theme, we need to choose one. So you can go here, again, links will be down in the video description, but we can search for Oh My Posh themes here. And you will get a listing of all the themes which are available. Some of these are really, really nice. In my case, I'm going to use this theme here, Bubbles Extra, because I kind of like this whole bubble aesthetic. However, there are many themes that you can use. Okay, so all you'll need is the name of the theme that you want to use. Oh My Posh will do the rest. Okay, so now back in PowerShell, we'll type notepad $profile. Now, if this is the first time you're changing your PowerShell profile, it will ask you whether you want to create the file, and I'm going to say yes. And we just need to type 2 lines here, import dash module oh my posh, and then to set the theme, set dash posh prompt dash theme, and then the name of the theme, which in my case is Bubbles Extra. Okay, so now all we need to do is save and then close Windows Terminal and reopen it. And as you can see, it's now downloading an executable and the theme, and voila! Here we are with the Bubbles Extra theme that I was using. Okay, and of course, besides being pretty, this Oh My Posh module also provides added functionality. Okay, so for example, I'm going to go to my documents folder and then my code folder, and I'm going to create a folder called test proj. There we are. Now I'm going to go inside this new test proj folder, and I'm going to launch Visual Studio Code in the current directory. And I'll click yes, trust the authors. And what I'm going to do here is create a new file. I'm just going to call it hello.py, something like that. And I'm going to say print hello world, something like that anyway. And going back here, we can now see, that we have the hello.py file. Now, what if I wanted to add this to a Git repository? Well, I can do that. I can do git init. And you will notice that now the icon shows that I am on the master branch and that there's one file which I have still to add to the repository. Okay, so if I do git status here, for example, you will see that there is hello.py. And so now I'm going to say git add hello.py. Okay, and so now there should be nothing left to add. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and commit. So I'm going to say git commit -m, let's see, initial commit, for example. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I need to actually set my user identity, which I'm going to do now. Okay, so now I'll try that commit again. And there you go. And you can see that the icon has changed to show me that now I have committed everything to master and I have nothing to add here. So it's not just there to be pretty, it's actually really, really useful. And combining this with all of the different profiles we can create and the features of Windows Terminal, I think you can have a very, very nice development environment on Windows. With the new Windows Terminal, Microsoft has finally provided a first-party tool that's actually worth using for developers and IT pros. Now, this is definitely a trend for Microsoft, a trend which includes this terminal, but also the Windows Package Manager, the Windows subsystem for Linux. Dare I say that in its efforts to win back developers, Windows is becoming more and more Unix-like? It's not just me who's making this observation, and time will tell how far Microsoft is willing to go in this direction. I hope you've enjoyed this overview of Windows Terminal, and if you have, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Tech Guru. Your subscription really helps to keep me motivated and keep making these videos. And if you're a superstar like the people on screen now, please also consider subscribing on Patreon for perks like early access to videos, your name in the credits, an exclusive chat room for patrons, and much more. Also, remember I'm on Odyssey if you want to watch these videos outside of YouTube. Well, that's it for today, and as always, thanks for watching.